to save you from the conservatives, or I'm going to save you from the punk rocker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Save me, and that's a way of doing it. You want to get a lot of likes.
Today, I sit down with Jay Bakker to talk about online confrontations with progressive Christian pastors. Stay tuned.
But one of the things when you said bishop, uh, I was gonna say I saw you paying your respects to Bishop Carlton Pearson and everything, and being present during that time, and just you're making it around. It looks like the world, and working in a lot of spaces and connecting with a lot of people, and you're doing a lot of good. So I just want to
Well,
lift that up first.
well, Carlton has been a lifelong friend. I've known Carlton since I mean, before I knew people, like when I was a baby, and he was always on mom and dad's show, and he became a real mentor to me. And one of the things that happened is we both ended up, after he came out and said he didn't believe in hell, that he was inclusionist. He lost everything, and so he was doing a speaking engagement with me. So if he's doing a speaking engagement with me, he's come down. I don't speak to crowds of 10,000. Maybe 30 people, but we're in Las Vegas, but it's Las Vegas, New Mexico.
Okay.
I had just come out gay affirming, I guess, couple years earlier. So my audience had also, we both were evangelical, kind of had an evangelical audiences, even if we weren't super, if I wasn't super evangelical. And we just got to know each other and sit in the car, and we had a lot of chats, and we talked about hell, and he changed my life. And the week before he passed, I called Carlton on the phone to encourage him, and he ends up encouraging me the whole time, saying, "Don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't stop. Don't get offline." He's like, "You don't have to get a building, but you got to stay online. You got to keep talking to people and keep loving people. You're the future." And I was like, "Well, and I mean, I was always blown away by Carlton. So when I was able to be part of his memorial service and then asked to speak at his memorial service, um, yeah, it was really cool. This documentary I've been working on for the past few years about my mom, he's a big part of that documentary. We had him come in and talk about what it was like. So yeah, what a great, and that church there is really great to be a part of too. That was a church that when years ago spoke about being affirming right as I became an ally, and they lost a lot of their members because I did that. It's funny because they're affirming church now. So it's just been quite a journey to see that happen, like, and to be part of that. And that community, just so many great leaders there.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of great leaders, and part of one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you and to share this more broadly is because we both engage a lot of leaders, and there are a lot of challenging and yet important conversations that need to happen. And I just want to know, how can we as leaders have those conversations with each other without it descending into degradation and violence and physical or verbal attacks or online attacks of one another?
It's tough. I don't think it's not, there's no perfect way of doing that. I mean, for me, well, one, I've always been a grace guy. Grace has always been my biggest thing. And I've also learned to allow, you know, one of my favorite sermons is this sermon by Paul Tillich that calls "You Are Accepted." And it's one thing to accept yourself as accepted, but then you have to learn to kind of accept others as being accepted. And so I've learned to kind of be patient with people who think differently than me and have conversations with them, because what I do is I learn about myself, and sometimes I even learn like why I'm triggered or why I'm angry or why. Yeah, so there's a lot to learn there. Um, and I always come out. It's really funny because I'm not a part of a denomination. I'm all self-taught. But I also feel like as a pastor, as a minister, as a follower of Jesus, like my role is to always, I'm going to push. I push people all the time. I mean, that's my work. I say hard things and I want people to think well. But when people push back, is to always try to listen, challenge, but challenge with grace and with love. But what you don't realize is there's so many nuances with people. You never know what's going to hurt them, what they're holding. how hurt they are. And I think one of the mistakes I sometimes make is, and I think we can all do this, is think pastors are more healed than they are, or that they're going to have it, like they're going to be able to have this conversation. And then you run into it and you go, oh, we're not having this conversation. And when it gets ugly, it's hard not to want to get ugly back. And so it really requires breathing, showing grace, remembering what you've learned. And for me, just the simple concept of Jesus saying, love your neighbor as yourself. And when they go, who's my neighbor? They go, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you. I just spent 5 months with Revelation going through the book of Galatians.
Mm.
And that whole book is about reconciliation, reconciling two parties that are completely divided over religious ideals. Judaizers and the Gauls, which were the Gentiles. And a lot of it had to do with circumcision and Judaism and nationalism even, which is really wild. And Paul is basically, he rebukes both sides at a time. It's really wild because this is a rebuke letter. That's also probably the best thing ever written about grace.
Mm.
And at one point he says, when he talks about the flesh, he talks about sexual stuff. He talks about not doing magic, which I really try hard to not do my magic. But he also says, don't create fractions. Don't go to math. Don't do factions. Don't think everyone in your group is right and everybody else is wrong. And he talks about the importance of it. He goes, love each other and love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law summed up in this. But instead of doing this, if you do this, don't do this. You've got to beware of biting and devouring one another.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the things we have to keep in mind. And there are some times where you just need to opt out, when you have to go, oh, here's a conversation that's really going to trigger me.
Yep.
And then I'm not healthy enough to be in. So I'm not going to jump in that. I've even had things where I've been in a conversation and realized I didn't need to be there and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to delete my posts because I'm not being the best me right now. I'm reacting to this. I'm not acting to it.
Yeah. We don't have to attend every conversation we're invited to. And this brings up Galatians 5, right? So we're going to, visit Galatians. The fruits of the Spirit are really important. And especially if we're talking about leaders and leadership, these are, of course, fruits that we practice. We don't just all of a sudden one and done. We Holy Ghost, or we've been baptized, or we completed confirmation, and now we have all these fruits. They, of course, need practice to be developed. But if we can't practice them with each other as leaders, it makes me question how we're practicing these fruits or these characteristics of self-discipline, for example, online with people that aren't leaders, with just regular lay folks or with people in our congregations. So that leads me to the next question that I have. Do you think that some people really just attack you online and say stuff about you because of who you are in the world and who your parents are?
Sometimes, but often I give the ammunition for people to say, it's so funny. Like I went to a conference recently, and everybody was like, a lot of the people on the conference kept saying the F word. And I remember thinking, like, I'm like, okay, well, these are cool Christians, but I remember, like, when I've been out, and I always tried to stay away from certain things, not because it was going to offend people. I just wanted to offend people with the right thing if I was going to offend. You know what I mean? And that's what I wanted them leaving to think about. I didn't want them being like, all I heard was this, you know? But yeah, sometimes people attack me because of that. It's crazy because the way I try to communicate with people is because of who I am, because of the experiences that I've had growing up, because I know what it's like to be scapegoated by the right and by the left, and so sometimes I think I carry that in on my back, thinking that people will understand, well, this guy's been through hell, through both sides and through the church, and gets it. And unfortunately, that's not always the way it goes. Um, so sometimes people attack me because I'm also willing to dive into almost any conversation, like, and often I want to stick up for the underdog or talk about rights. And I think everybody's got equal rights and everybody should be treated equally. But sometimes that doesn't go over too well. It's hard to explain. I mean, I got off of Twitter, but Twitter, I used to have a lot of people asking me to denounce my father,
Yeah.
and I refused. I refused to do that. I mean, my dad's a Trump supporting, into times obsessed guy, um, but he's still my father, you know. And I preached too many years of telling LGBTQ parents not to reject their kids for me to turn around and reject my own father because he does something that I don't necessarily agree with or understand. Um, and I don't want him to do the same thing to me, and he kind of has. So that's tough. I don't know. You know, I don't veer away from hot topics. I think there's things important. I think we should talk about politics, but I also don't think we should allow politics to become above our brothers and sisters in Christ. I think that should be the trump card always. And when we start to notice our loyalties going towards politicians or political groups or things like that, um, I know there's a lot of fear out there. A lot of people are afraid. But I think we've put politics in a place where we diminish each other's value, we diminish each other's experiences and nuances. We even diminish the fact that we live in a country where we're all allowed to vote or not vote or do what we want to do. I mean, there's a part of that freedom that's really nice. And what I've started to realize, when I was growing up, it was always the Christians who were like, "Don't vote for Democrats," because usually they thought the Democratic presidential candidate was the Antichrist, right? I was on a Christian television station, so I literally worked on a camera. And so I would hear this all the time as I had a Clinton Gore shirt on because I was, 17 and a rebel. I'd be like,
Rebel.
"Oh yeah, you think that's the Antichrist?" Um, but but yeah, I feel like we forgot what's valuable, and we don't know, and it shows up basic ways that we don't know how to love our enemies. We don't know how to disagree well. We don't know how to have tough conversations because we're all part of a change. We all have to be involved if we want true equality. And that's the thing, is we say we want equality and say we want tolerance until it comes to equality for somebody else who's not practicing my equality, or it comes to tolerance to someone who's not being tolerant. It's one thing to say, give me tolerance. It's another thing to say I've got to give tolerance. And so that is a struggle for folks, and sometimes it's a big ask, and I get that. Unfortunately for me, I'll often get cut off from that kind of conversation because someone else will be like, "Well, you're a white cisgender straight male," and for me, if it's someone in leadership, I often find that is just them using a trump card to shut me down.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy having these kind of conversations with you, because people can say all they want that they know you because of what you post online, or that they see a white straight man so they just know you, but they don't know you. I've known you for many years, more than a decade, and I can't say I know you, but what I do know of you is that you're kind, that you care about people, that you are compassionate, and that you can have challenging conversations with people. The thing that I think happens is people identify with their politics instead of understanding that these are just ideas. Our
Yeah.
ideas are not our identity. So they feel like if you attack their ideas, then you're attacking
Second,
them.
their identity. Yeah.
If you disagree with them being a Republican or a Democrat, then you disagree with them as a human being. And I feel like that's why we can't have conversations with people, because people don't know who they are.
And that's the thing, is we when Paul talks, go back to Galatians, says there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, male or female, but we're all one in Christ. And so that's often the thing of where we're supposed to find our identity. Now, you'll be surprised how many times I've used that verse in a talk and had people push back and be really angry because they want to be like, "No, no, my identity is in this, and you don't know what I've been through." Um, but we don't know what anyone's been through.
Right.
I mean, Lawrence, you sat and visited me when I was in a mental hospital because I tried to take my own life. A lot of people don't know that. I'm not proud of that, but that's the facts of life, is that, I suffer from mental health issues. Like, we all have things. So we're all carrying baggage with us.
Yeah.
And we never know when we're going to be the last, I don't want to be the last negative thing that breaks the camel's backs in someone's life. And I feel as a leader, I've got to love everyone. I've got to love my enemy. And if I'm incapable of doing that, I need to reach out to someone else who can either help me do that or say, hey, there's something going on here that it's just beyond me. It's beyond my bandwidth. Maybe you could help this person out.
That's right. That's right. And you are familiar with Resma Manikim, my grandmother's hands. We were in Minneapolis at the same time that this book had
Yep.
come out and really hit the scene. And now it's all over the world. But what you're naming is the fact that our trauma lives in us, and we don't know what people have gone through. We don't know what will trigger someone. And so, as leaders, it is important for us to really embody those fruits of the spirit so that we are the life generative energy of God and of Jesus, of the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit when we encounter people, because otherwise, like you said, we are the negative straw that has broken the camel's back, or that has really just caused so much stress and chaos in someone's life, when we could have been the antidote of hope and kindness that would have fueled someone through a tough situation.
I mean, the ideas of the fruits of the spirit, thinking about them, like joy is one of joy. I always leave out joy. It's such a Freudian slip for me because I think I don't deserve joy for some reason.
Uh-oh.
And I have one friend who's always like, "You left out joy again." I'm like, "Man, I need to like do something." I went to a concert the other night and there was joy there, so that's good. Um, but peace and patience. I mean, these are the long suffering. These are the things that are talking when Jesus says, "Pick up your cross." And I told my congregation today, it's like picking up your cross is not saying like I didn't pause the video to look at boobs the other day. No, picking up your cross is saying picking up your cross is loving others and disagreeing with others well.
That's
You
right.
know, and I've been reading a lot of John Hume, and John Hume was a politician in Northern Ireland during the Troubles when you had two sides of Northern Ireland fighting, and you had Catholics and Protestants that were at war with each other. I mean, two. I mean, it was bigger than that. It wasn't just about that. But John Hume was inspired by Dr. King and the nonviolence. And what John Hume ended up doing was, starting starting his own entity of the political branch, and he would bring in both sides to be a part of his group because he thought everybody has to be a voice. And if we're going to have a Northern Ireland, has to be united Ireland. So there has to be Protestants and there has to be Catholics, and we all have to have a voice. And so that's the thing is I think we often get the idea, well, if this person has a voice, we treat voices like it's pie, you
Yeah.
know, well, then I don't have a voice. Um, and that's not true. That is just not how it works. Let your voice be heard. We need more voices speaking up for this. And if we're going to talk about tolerance and we're going to preach tolerance and then not show tolerance to our brothers and sisters when they say, well, I don't want to vote this way, or I'm going to vote for Cornell West, or I'm going to, and then we judge them and we scapegoat them and say, well, they're the problem. They're going to, we've missed the point. We might be able to, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, well, I don't think that's going to be very helpful.
Right.
But to demonize somebody and say, "Well, you're going to destroy my," because I know politics, and I don't support capitalism. Okay, uh, so what? How do I vote if I don't want to have a capital? There's not one available for me. I've grown up in the punk rock world where you have people who are anarchists and things like that. And when all of a sudden we're telling them they can't vote their conviction because they need to be scared. And for me, that just rings such a familiar bell of growing up going like, if you vote for the left, if you vote for the Democrat, you're voting for the Antichrist. And it's just the type of thing of like, I don't want to give any politician that much strength. I don't want to give any government that much strength of who I associate with, who I love, and how I treat the other. It's just not,
That's
to
right.
me, that's not the way to go.
I live in the prophetic. I want to have a plan and a picture for life, whoever gets elected,
Yes.
whichever candidate gets in office. We should have a plan for how we want things to go. our life doesn't start or stop based on an election. And what's sad is I see a lot of the same, and some people might get mad when they see this because they got mad at me last time. But when Trump was elected the first time, people were upset with me because I said, the world is not ending. Uh,
Yeah.
the world is not over. And horrible things have happened before and since then.
Yeah.
And if Trump gets elected again, the world won't end because of it. Will horrible things happen before then?
Yes.
Will horrible things happen after then? Absolutely. But what is our plan for moving forward? And what is our plan for engaging one another in ways that lift up and celebrate our humanity instead of trying to tear each other down because of divergent points of view?
It's why that you said that, because when Trump got in, okay, literally Trump won, and I had to speak at a church that I'd never spoken at before. I am so sorry about that. Are you still there? Yeah. So when Trump got elected, I had to speak. I got invited to this Methodist, I think it was a Methodist church downtown Minnesota, um, near Familia skateboard shop. There's that big stone church.
Yes, yes.
And so I had to speak there, and I was like, how? Like, this was the day after. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not the time to have a guest speaker. And that was tough. Luckily, my little son, my ex-wife, but who was my wife at the time, brought in Milo, and he was really little. And Milo ran down the aisle of this big church and said, "Papa," and grabbed me and hugged me, and that kind of broke the ice for everybody. So we were able to have a little bit more of a conversation. Um, but the next day, I went and saw this former musician who now does spoken words and writes books. His name is Henry Rollins. He used to be a part of this band called Black Flag.
Mm.
And he just does these talks now. And he said the same exact thing that you said.
Mm.
And people weren't necessarily happy. You know, we want to say the sky is falling, but for me, it's like people are worried about what's going to happen to LGBTQ rights, what's going to happen to, and for me, it's like, I know that I'm going to be fighting for the rights of everybody and everyone's equality. You know, if it was up to me, there would be no religion in government. Government would just protect everyone, and we would be able to argue our religion in another area. You know what I mean? That would just be like, they provide health care and they provide good roads, you know, and they make sure everybody has a job that they can go to. And that type of, I mean, I think that's one of the things we have to think about is, if are we willing to take religion out of the political thing? And grew up watching the left say, oh, the Christian right are too political, and they've got the Christian right and they've got the Christian coalition and they're doing this. But I am talking to progressives who talking about politics the same exact way the Christian right did, with the same exact fear tactics, and telling me I'm less of a man, and that I'm the, you know, the evil white guy who's trying to take away everyone's rights, and that I don't know what I'm talking about. And we are judging people's whole life works, all their convictions, all their experiences, based on what they're talking about in politics. Now tell me that's not an idol.
Mm.
And I honestly feel that we have become followers of politics, that our gods have become politicians. And what a strange time for that to happen, when both politicians are just really not very good, and that nobody really wants them, but for somehow we're lifting them up on these pedestals, and or lifting the bad guy up on it. You know, that's always the, you know, that's why I was the bad guy. They're gonna, you know, that's how a lot of people used to preach, is fear. That's why a lot of people preach hell and things like that. Like, I got to save you from this, or I'm going to save you from the gays, or I'm going to save you from the conservatives, or I'm going to save you from the punk rocker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Save me, you know, and that's a way of doing it. You want to get a lot of likes. I watch a lot of people do the ex-Christian podcast and all this stuff, and then they call their podcast deconstruction podcast, but they're not deconstructing. They're just sitting there making fun of evangelicals and making fun of our brothers and sisters who think differently than us. And that's not deconstruction. That's not even construction. That's just sowing discord. And long as we allow politics and even our theologies to sow discord, you know, like, I have come to a realization that if I'm going to change people's minds, I have to do what Dr. King said, and I have to love them. That is the only force capable of turning an enemy into a friend. So yes, there will be times that I have to love people who don't see the humanity of people I care about. But let me put this clearly too. It's not just my LGBTQ brothers and sisters that they don't see the humanity of. They also see that I'm going to burn in hell for eternity. And when you see someone, even like your father, your family say that, and you're thinking like, how would you even want to be in heaven if you know I'm being tortured like the whole time? You're there. Like, when do you just get you one day you're just like, well, this it's the mansion's got a jacuzzi, so I can think less about Jay in the jacuzzi. Or walking down the gold streets. Like, no one could do that. That would be hell. That would actually be hell, would be being in heaven and knowing the people you care about most are being tortured. That's why I do not buy into that concept of hell. And I also know enough theology and philosophy and scholarship to know that that's not what it is. Um, but it, so I get that too. That's the thing is we don't realize is like, well, I'm not, I'm not going to be able to get my health care. Guess what? I barely have health care right now.
Yeah.
I am one accident away from being homeless, every day. I saw one of the a civil rights leader pastor the other day speaking. He goes, if you don't think there are poor white people out there who are suffering and their lives are falling apart because of, that should be bringing us together. Do you want to know, like 99% of the meth addicted, or not even meth, it's fentanyl addictions and I see are these like young white guys who are skinny and dying and their lives are falling apart. Drug addiction, all this stuff affects us all. Yeah. And for me, it's not about, oh, I feel more sad because he's white, or I feel more sad because he's Asian, and Asians really should be doing better. That's not the way, that's not how I think. I was never raised to think that way. That was a cool thing about growing up. I did a sermon last week about the positive things of evangelicalism. And I grew up in the Assemblies of God, and my parents had a mega church. And one of the things that was really beautiful about that was how integrated it was. Now, there were a lot of closeted people, and LGBTQ folks weren't really out, but there was a lot of very don't ask, don't tell things like, we don't want to get rid of the worship leader, that type of thing. Just don't tell us what's going on. But there were Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Irish, everybody was there, and I was a part of it. And women could be leaders in the Assemblies of God. So for me, there was not this whole sexism thing that you might see in like a Southern Baptist or like a Calvinism, neo-Calvinism type of thing. And so I was allowed to grow up into this way of seeing people as people and seeing people use their best. And what a gift to see such a young person and be able to see people using their gifts and to be a part of the body, not based on anything but their gifts. And I grew up and I came to a very harsh reality of life. And so I think as leaders, we've got to do better. We've got to one of the things I loved what I heard Dr. King say once, obviously on a recording, but was he goes, my enemies aren't these people. My enemy is misinformation, and these folks have failed and become victims of misinformation, and they are just as much victims as those who are being treated who are being treated segregated. He's like, we've got to save everybody. We got to say everybody needs to be delivered. We need to deliver from racism because it's rotting the white person's soul. And so now I go that, and I have to see that when I see people who I know hate me, or when I talk to even my own parents, talk to my own dad, and I know how he feels. I just have to love beyond that. And the fact is, if we want to have a movement, if we really want to change things, we have to continue to do what we can to grow and love people and bring them together. And I'm exhausted. I'm tired of fight. I do not want to fight with. I'm so shocked that I honestly now feel more nervous around my progressive brothers and sisters in Christ than I do my conservative brothers and sisters in Christ.
Well, and I think part of this touches on what we talked about before. There are a lot of people who will say, and they have said, that you are gaslighting. You specifically are gaslighting them because of your sharing and lifting up who you are and what you've been through. And they say that's gaslighting. I understand the definition of gaslighting. What I think they don't understand is that we get to hold multiple truths at the same time. I can be outraged about trans violence or violence against trans folks, and I can be outraged about the high fentanyl addiction rates of straight white guys. I can, and we talked about this probably about a decade ago now. If you don't remember this, I had a youth group member who wore a
Yes. No,
Mexican.
I think about that
You
almost
remember that?
every day. I think about that.
Right?
I swear to you, that is one of my examples that I use for people, and I think about, and it's one of the reasons I reach out to you. It's one of the reasons I told my dad that you were the pastor that I thought was closest to Jesus that I know. I swear I did. I promise. Everything I just said is 100% true. Okay, go
That's
ahead, tell your story.
exactly why, though. And to date, I mean, this is a now grown man who, if I would have rejected him, would have treated him like less than human, he'd be a different person right
But
now.
he had the MAGA hat on
Yeah.
at your church,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
you were showing.
And I still
Took a
was.
picture with him.
I did. I took a picture with him. I was still his youth pastor. I still loved him as a spiritual person in his life. I still affirmed him, and I did not have to degrade him or to verbally assault him in order to say that I might disagree with his politics and or his family's politics. Now, mind you, there were some people really upset that they saw me in a picture with a kid that had a MAGA hat on.
Yeah.
I got some letters. I got some really good uh, recordings from folks. I got threats, and I'm like, this is the point. If we can't guide and shepherd our children that have divergent perspectives, it's no wonder that we're arguing with each other and degrading each other because of disagreements. And I just wish that we could, as progressive Christians, and maybe that word needs to go away because maybe it's not progress that we're seeking or that we are even embodying, but maybe it's something different. But I feel like we should be able to have productive conversations, even if we don't see eye to eye. And there are things that you and I don't see eye to eye on, but you are my brother and you are my friend, and I love you dearly and would give my life for you. And if we can't say that about the people that we love and the people that are in our pews or our actual neighbors or the people that are on the other side of a computer screen or a Facebook post or a Twitter post or an X post now, uh,
Yeah.
then who are we and how can we say that we are followers of Jesus?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, was in First John where he says God is love, and but also talks about the fact that if you can't love someone you can see, how can you love a God that you can't see?
That's it.
And for me, when I'm asked, well, what do you love when you love your God? That famous question, I always say the other. I got to love the other. And right now, the other are MAGA people. It's easy to say like, oh, well, they're just they have all the power and stuff. But I can turn on Comedy Central and watch the news and watch them be mocked
Right.
relentlessly over and over again and made fun of. I don't see Amazon or Starbucks putting up Christian flags, or conservative. I don't know what a conservative flag would be. I mean, I have some ideas, but I won't go there. Um, sorry, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
we got to realize is that we all have power in different places, um, and we've got to make sure that we're not using that to hurt others and to tear each other apart. And I'm really worried about the church. I'm really worried that there's so much. I mean, discord, or is that what the right discord in the church? That I mean, the people are just sowing it constantly and making fun of each other, and it becomes this almost like echo chamber of where this is how right-wing Christians make money, by warning us about the left wings, and the left wings make money by warning us about the right wings, and then we make fun of each other, and it just is a vicious circle. And revolution is the church I do. I heard a great term for it there the other day, is like re-evolving. We've got to re-evolve. We have evolved in a way that is not productive, that peace isn't there. And peace is including everyone. It's bringing everyone to the table. And when you love your enemy, it's knowing who your enemy is. So my thing is, as soon as you become my enemy, or you think I'm your enemy, and you're a follower of Christ, especially someone who's taken leadership with it, your job is to love me, never give up on me, never lose faith. Oh, you're going to do good for me. You're going to loan to me when I can't repay you. You're going to, because Jesus, what's the difference if we just love those who love us? There's no difference there. That's why it's Christianity. That's why it's a religion. That's what sets it a little bit apart, is this idea of this inclusive love. What I was impressed with my mom, and she knew the power of actions over words. She really did. Because she would have been slaughtered in today's world if she'd spoken up about different things. But she could have she could be in a room full of drag queens, and then the next week be in singing at a Southern Baptist church. You know, she just loved and included everybody, and felt like, if I say things, it's just going to continue to divide us. But I know that Jesus has told me to love everybody. So that's all I can do. So when she did Pride, when they had her at Pride, you know, and here my mom wasn't even sure about gay marriage or anything. And she's like at Pride leading people. She leads everybody in Jesus loves me, because she's like, what I do know, because she's not, wasn't a theologian. What I do know is that God doesn't make any junk, and that Jesus loves everybody who is here and present. He loves those weird people holding up the horrible signs. He knows they're misguided, and he loves all of you too, you know? And so for me, I it's so funny, because the more I talk about peacemaking, the more I talk about this stuff, I honestly, this is really strange, is that I had some progressives the other day say, oh, well, what's so revolutionary about being a moderate? I was called a moderate, which, if you're a progressive, calling someone a moderate is an insult. Um, you know, and then I had the same thing, a guy saying, well, you're just dragging people into the gates of hell. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't, I can't win.
Yeah.
There's no way to win. But for me, it can't be about winning. And I think one of the things I have to work on is not letting people's opinions uh, hurt me as much as they do, because I am a very sensitive soul. But part of that sensitive soul allows me to want to love more people and stand up for their rights.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to have to, you know, I can, a lot of people will argue that, well, if I don't vote for this person, or if I do vote for this person, then I'm not really loving my neighbors. You know, that's the thing. But I think we just have to allow each other to be on nuance and realize, like Jesus said, you know, whose pictures on the, give to Caesar what is Caesar.
Right.
You know, someone sent me this thing the other day. It was like, what will you do on the day that Donald Trump is called in and he starts to change this long thing? And I'm reading it. They DM me. I get all sorts of wild stuff. And I said, I will wake up and I will love people the way I've always done.
Yeah.
You know, and if I have to go march more, I'm going to march more. You know, I told somebody the other day that sometimes I feel like we're debating between world war or civil war.
Yeah.
And I said, either way, I am going to fight against injustice, fight for justice, fight for reconciliation, and fight for restoration. And so when I always, you know, every time people get mad at me on my podcast, some of my followers get mad at me because I'll talk to on YouTube, you'll get a lot of trolls.
Yeah.
And they get mad at me for talking to them. And last week, somebody was like, why, Jay, you're just wasting time. You're wasting our time. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to this person because this person might be the last straw for the next person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I will talk directly to these and say, hey, listen, I understand you're hurt. I understand you're mad. I know why you want to come, but there's so much better you could do. I said, if you go in and do the opposite and go in and tell somebody that they're loved or that they're encouraged or that you like something about them, they're never going to forget that Yuki Yuki at, you know,
Right.
Nerds said,
That's right.
you are loved, you know, or I love your mustache, or I love your eyes, or that's a cool shirt, or oh my gosh, that book. Those are little things like that that I never forgot.
Yeah.
And I just really want to be a person of reconciliation. I want to be a peacemaker. And I so desperately want that I maybe sometimes push a little too hard on people for that. Because I will get on phones with people, like people who like, you know, I'll talk to trolls for hours, and then I'll get to know their name, get to know where they live. I'll end up meeting them one day. I've done it. I mean, I've had people scream at me in the middle of my talks and then end up becoming close friends with them down the road, because I think that it is so valuable that we love each other despite our differences, and that we don't allow anything. I don't even let the Bible get in the way of me loving somebody. That's just not how it works. To me, love, it's almost, I've always said that Bible's kind of this riddle of like, oh, what are you going to follow? You know, sometimes like if you don't know how to read it, but it's always the most important thing is loving God with all your heart, and equally as important as loving your neighbor as yourself. And but that means, like, if you're loving your neighbor as yourself, the problem is, I think we often forget, is it also tells love your enemy and do good to those who persecute you. So you can't just say, well, I'm loving my neighbors, so now you're my enemy because you're an enemy of my neighbors. No, guess what? Now you got to love those people as well. We got to love everybody. If we really want inclusion, we have to practice inclusion.
This is why I love pastoring. I get to pastor in the Michigan Conference, and we have purple churches. And for those that don't know what that means we have a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. We have Republicans and Democrats, and most likely folks in the middle and folks that don't identify are in those categories either. And I get to love all of them. And it's not about, I only love those who vote like me or agree with me, but I get to love all the people in our churches, all of the people, regardless of how they vote. And I don't think that that's impossible. As a Black, queer, trans pastor in this century,
Yeah.
with a bunch of intersections, it's an honor to love people who don't agree with me or see life the way that I do. And I don't feel threatened by them because they are different. And I feel like if that is something I can do, then how can we get other people that don't have as many intersections to be able to love more expansively when those of us with all these intersections can do it too?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I mean, that's beautiful. And it's true. You're blessed to be able to do that. I sit online with my congregation and say, I want a diverse conversation. I mean, a diverse congregation. I want us to be a diverse group of people, but I want us to have diversity of thought as well as diversity of gender and skin tone and sexuality. I want us to have diversity. I want right wing conservatives. I want left wing conservatives, left wing liberals, whatever. I want in between. I want atheists. I want Satanists. I want Muslims. I want us all to be able to come together. And one of the things that I have to talk about every week is we're going to learn to argue well or disagree well.
Right.
We can disagree, but disagree well. And it's really wild to watch sometimes when I'm talking, something start to happen, in the conversation, and people are disagreeing, and then seeing my friend Zoe, who is a they, them queer person, talk, and then my conservative oil bodyguard from when I was a kid, who's a conservative, and them joining together to love on the person who's coming to tell us that we're all going to hell or we're all bad, and then them coming together and talking about the importance of agreeing. And so to me, that's what I want to do. We've got to not just focus on diversity of what we can see, but we got to have the diversity on the inside as well. And that is hard work. That is tough work. But man, when you're able to bring people together like that, it is like one of the greatest rewards. It's just the proof of the power of love. And I love that. I love the power of love. I love the power of grace, and I love the power of forgiveness. And I'm always looking at a way to practice that. So if you're somebody who's arguing with me online or something, I'm going, let's talk, let's do this. I'm trying to find a way to find that common ground. And it's not always easy. As you know, I mean, I had an argument just recently, and I don't take that lightly either. It breaks my heart. I mean, I was this morning when you're like, let's do a talk, let's talk on the phone. I was like, I had to run and do errands, and I'm just like, man, I feel like I've been beat over the head just because I'm compulsive. So I second guess and try to look at everything. When I sent you saying, I don't know what to do, but I also said, please rebuke me if I'm doing the wrong thing here, because I need another set of eyes. And you didn't come to me and go like, you did 100% well. You were kind of like, what are you guys trying to get at? I was like, damn. Yeah. And I was like, no, but that's good. That's what I needed to hear, because that's why I want leadership in my own life, to remind me who I am.
Yeah. What is the goal of our conversation? Why are we doing what we're doing? Because if all we're doing is arguing for the sake of one of us needing to be right, then it's not a productive conversation. Yeah. So I thank you for letting me be able to speak not only words of truth and wisdom, but also correction and suggestions, because I think that's truly what friends are for. That's really what friends are for. I love speaking with you, not just because you tell me all the things I want to hear, but we have challenging conversations and we get to see different perspectives. And I think that's what makes us stronger. So if you had a final thought that you wanted to share with these folks that are watching or listening, what would it be?
I would say this, and this is a strange way to end it, but I grew up being taught this thing called friendship evangelism. And so you were friends with people to change them. And then one day I woke up and realized that's neither friendship nor evangelism, and with a hidden agenda. And often our arguments are an agenda. Um, and so what I had to do is just make the decision to love people where they were at. And I'll tell you what, it paid off so much in my life, especially in my congregation in Atlanta, because I had people who I really felt were part of the church who'd never stepped foot in the church because I wanted to be in the community, and we were in the community, and it was just loving people without an agenda, and listening to things and disagreeing, but disagreeing well with respect, so we could still see each other the next day, or maybe take a couple days, but still see each other. And I think that's what we gotta ask is what's the end goal here, you know? And also ask ourselves, why is this affecting me the way it is? So, but I would just say, like, let's get evangelism, and we can't change anybody, but love can change people. I think having conversations and information can change people. I know it does for me. I know when I have tough conversations, I learn a lot about myself, and changes are made. When I see something there, I make a change, and I hope we can practice it. I hope we can practice using nonviolence on the keyboard and
Mm.
online. And so, because Dr. King talked about the importance of nonviolence, not just of the fists, but of our mouth and our tongue and our words. And I really hope we can learn to do that, and respect each other's nuances, uh, to build a greater community. And I think, with the church shrinking like it is, one day we might all have to work together. I mean,
It's
I think we should be all working together to help poverty in this country already. And I don't think, I'll be glad to sit down with my Calvinist brothers and sisters, and my ELCA brothers and sisters, and my UCC brothers and sisters, to do that. If that's going to be a common ground for us, is loving people and helping people have a home over their head, let's do it. Sorry, I'm like a
you know
preacher, so I just preach every one quick end. 30 minutes later.
all right,
All
because
right.
we happen to be recruiting pastors in the Michigan Conference. So if you yourself are available, there's churches that are looking for pastors and looking for pastors to love on them and equip them and lead them in faith, and to be able to meet them where they're at. And so everything that you just said, holding space for people, loving them where they're at, and also not being judgmental, being nonviolent with our words and our actions. Those are all really important qualities, not only for the church and pastors right now, but for everyone in society. So thank you for the time that you've shared with me and with all of us, and for all that you do. And I
Sure.
know that you are someone that I'll continue to lift up in my prayers and in my gratitude, because not only of what you do, but because of who you are. So thank you for being who you are, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Love you.
Love you too, man.